Hey guys, I'm Matt, a developer from Ohio, and in this video, I'll be walking you through the authorization form project. To complete this project, you'll need to be familiar with components, JSX objects, and HTML. Let's get started. In this project, we'll make some alterations to an existing React component in order to implement a layer of password protection. We see some contact info displayed on the page. We're going to add a password form that hides this info until the correct password is entered. The password is stored in the constructor, which is the method that sets up the initial state of this component. We can see that password is set to swordfish and authorized is set to false. Below the constructor is a method called authorize, which takes an event, that's the kind of object you get when you submit a form, and checks it against the password. If the user entered swordfish, this method will change authorized to true. Lastly, we have the render method, which you should be familiar with if you've done any React work. This method will return a JSX object. Right now, that JSX contains the contact info. We're going to add logic to change what is shown based on the results of the authorize method. Start by testing a small change. We want the h1 to display contact only when authorized is true. We'll have it show enter the password until then. We can use a ternary operation to write this logic concisely inside of the h1. If you need a refresher, a ternary operator is a collapsed form of the if-else pattern. We'll write the condition, then the return value for true, and then the return value for false. So we'll use curly's here to make an inline expression, and then our condition is this.state.authorized, which is this authorized value from the constructor. And then we'll use a question mark to start the ternary operation. For true, we'll return contact. And for false, we'll return enter the password. The page should now say enter the password. To finish our test, we'll change authorized to true in the constructor. Now that the user is authorized, the page shows contact. The state of the h1 depends on the state of authorized. We're going to extend this to work for the contact info as well. First, we'll need to set authorized back to false because a user should not be authorized when they first arrive at the page. We changed authorized in the code, but a user will need a way to change authorized in the UI. We'll need to show a login form if they aren't authorized. This is going to be the same as the h1 with the ternary operation that decides what to show, but the login form and contact info are both a lot larger than a few words. We're going to save them as separate JSX objects so that we can insert them as variables. First, we'll focus on the login JSX object, which will be a form element. Remember to use parentheses when working with multi-line JSX objects. So we're going to set up login as a new variable. We're going to use parentheses here because we're making a multi-line JSX object. And inside, we're going to create a form. All forms need the attribute action, which determines what happens when you press submit. Often, this links to some PHP file that would process the data, but we don't need to do that because our logic is all on this page. We're going to set this to an octothorpe, which links to this page and prevents the user from getting redirected. So we'll add action equals octothorpe. To finish the form, we need to add two inputs. One will be a text field for the user to type in a password, and the other will be a submit button. Remember that most of JSX is just regular HTML, so we'll write these inputs just like we would in a static HTML document. The password field should have the attribute type set to password, which makes it display as dots instead of as plain text. It should also have the placeholder attribute set to password to indicate to the user what kind of information they should enter. So inside of this first input, we'll set type equal to password, and we're also going to set placeholder equal to password. Submit button should have an attribute type set to submit. This is all you need to format a submit button. So we'll just write type equals submit. With the login half done, we just need the contact info half. This one is already written for us in the return statement. We're just going to cut and paste it into a variable so that we can switch between it and login. So a new variable, contact info, and we're going to set this to a multi-line JSX object, and we're going to cut out this unordered list and paste that in here because that represents the contact info. Now that we have two JSX objects, switching between them is as easy as switching between our h1 strings. We'll write another ternary operation that returns contact info if authorized is true, and login if it's not. So we'll use curly's to start that, and write this.state.authorized, question mark, and then for true, we'll show contact info, and for false, we'll show login. The page now shows the login form, which is exactly what we wanted. However, entering the password and pressing submit doesn't bring up the contact info. This is because the method that can change authorized to true is never called. We need to pass the password to authorize when the user clicks on Submit. Back in the login JSX object, we can add the onSubmit attribute to the form element. Any method we pass into this attribute will run when a Submit button is pressed. If we set it to authorize, then the password will be checked and the authorized state can be changed. So we'll add onSubmit and set that equal to this.authorize. Everything is hooked up, so all that's left is testing it out. If we enter the wrong password, then nothing should happen. If we enter the correct password, swordfish, then we should get through to the contact info. We can also change the password to any other string in the constructor method. Keep in mind that there's no encryption or server-side validation or anything like that. Actual security is kind of out of the scope of this project. In this project, we used basic JavaScript logic and JSX objects to add a lot of functionality to an existing page. We used embedded expressions to switch between stored JSX objects, showing the power of React's modularity and dynamicity. I'm Matt for Codecademy. Happy coding!